Hello, everyone. I'm trying to get this all set up so I can kind of see everyone's comments. Can you guys hear me okay? Hello, everyone. I'm trying to get this all set up so I can kind of see everyone's comments. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. There's a little bit of a delay, so don't mind if I'm paused for a little bit and then I start to get started. But I'll go ahead and get started. So first, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Camille Silva, and I am a BCBA. I'm a BCBA, and I live in the Oregon area in the United States. So I kind of just wanted to give a little bit of background about myself and how I kind of got in the field of ABA and how I started working with children who are on the spectrum. I started out my sophomore year in college. I didn't know anything about autism. I didn't know anything about ABA. It was all really new to me. I just needed a job working at, on campus. So I went ahead and kind of looked into it. After I got a call from the person who was interviewing for their clinic, I went ahead and did my research and tried to find information about autism. And I called my mom and kind of talked to her about it. And she just told me to just go for it. So I went ahead and I did it. And I have been, when I first started out, it took me a little bit to get used to everything, but it just kind of naturally came to me. I was still really new to the game, but I learned pretty quickly and I fell in love with it, honestly. And then about a year and a half into my little mini start of my career, my family did foster care, and we went ahead and fostered a a little boy. He was about 2 months when we got him, and I started to kind of notice some characteristics of autism at 10 months. So I went ahead and told my mom, like, I would get him evaluated to see like if there's anything that, we can do for him now. But I kind of still worked with my mom a little bit. So long story short, we adopted him at 2, and he got his autism diagnosis at 4. So I'm kind of on both sides. I'm a BCBA, so I work directly with children with autism and adults with autism as well. But I also kind of have like the parent side of it just a little bit, because I basically helped raise him with my mom. But yeah, so I fell in love with it. I got a lot of practice, working with kids directly, and then also kind of seeing like the parent side of it with my mom and my little brother. But I kind of started to develop more of a passion for parent training. So currently my passion is parent training, and it's something that I really, really enjoy because I love to see the parents kind of light up when they feel more in control and they can feel, they have the resources and all of the strategies to use when something new comes up. So they feel a lot more confident. But I definitely have kind of developed that passion over time. So originally I kind of like training new therapists because they were kind of new and, they didn't really know exactly how to apply the principles. But my kind of style of training is let's kind of figure out what the kids' needs are. And then I help the parents, and I kind of look at the parents' way of learning as well. So I take that into consideration. So now I'm a BCBA, and I've had my certification for about a year now, but I've actually been in the field for over 9 years. So I'm coming up on my 10th year here soon. So I'm just going to now start talking about just like what ABA is. And I see a lot of your comments here, so I'm just going to kind of scroll through to see if there are any questions pertaining to anything I just said. Hello, Anita. Okay, you guys are asking some pretty good questions. So let me go ahead and get started with what ABA is. So ABA is just the science of behavior. So I don't know if there are any of you who are currently receiving services, or if they've kind of explained what ABA is. And I like to kind of give like a super basic explanation just so that people can understand. So ABA is the science of behavior. A lot of people associate ABA. Well, let me first tell you what it is. ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. So a lot of people think that ABA is just for children with autism, but in fact, it's just a science of behavior. So regardless if someone has autism or doesn't have autism, we could still apply the principles to create behavior change. So the reason why ABA is really associated with autism is because it's the only known proven treatment to be effective for people on the spectrum. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's the only thing that's going to work, but it's the only known thing that has research behind it that says, yes, this is effective. So let's see. So Robert asked, why is ABA only for autism diagnosis? So I hope that answered your question. And please feel free to continue to add more questions in there so I can get some more questions answered. Good morning, everyone who just joined. I'm just kind of I've talked about my journey on how I got into the field of ABA and how I became a behavior analyst. Go ahead and write your questions in the comments and I'll try to get as many questions as possible answered. So I was just kind of explaining how ABA is just a science of behavior and how a lot of people use it for behavior change. So what I do as a behavior analyst and as a supervisor, I need my master's degree to practice independently and my certification. So I sat for an exam and, passed it and now I have my certification. But I went ahead and, so what I do as a behavior analyst is I look at a behavior or, I like to get the parents' input on what their biggest need is. So I look at the behavior and I kind of analyze it. So I watch and look for patterns. And once I find those patterns, then I problem solve. So I problem solve things to try to prevent the behavior. And then I problem solve for things that, what to do if the behavior does occur. And then I kind of train either the registered behavior technicians, which are the therapists who provide that direct service with the client. I train them, and then I also train the parents on how to implement those strategies while they're at home. So my biggest thing is that if the parents are on the same page and kind of really consistent with implementation, we can kind of see if the treatment plan is working or not. And as soon as we see that the treatment plan isn't working, then we go ahead and make those changes. So the way that we can kind of the way that we figure out if something is working or not is that we graph everything. So things are data-based. So we don't just, make decisions based off of a hunch or, something like that, but we really look at patterns and we graph to see if the behavior that we want to change, is it going up if we want it to go up, or is it going down if we want it to go down? So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. I'm going to go ahead and look at more questions. Let's see. Good morning, Amanda. Okay, so Veronica Yvette asked, when one starts ABA therapy, how long is a session typically, and how many times a week or month do they typically recommend? So that's a really, really good question. I'm glad you brought it up. So basically what happens is, and this is kind of my job, I do certain assessments to kind of figure out, what areas we need to work on. And usually the main skills that we look for is communication, socialization, and daily living skills, or things that are, practical living skills to basically survive in this world. So we look at these assessments, and then we kind of figure out, okay, with certain deficits and excesses, so things that happen, too often, or for deficits, things that don't happen enough, we look to see how much of a need there is. And then we look at the availability of the parents, and we kind of come up with the prescription. And the prescription is, the amount of hours per week. So what I do as a clinician, I let the parents know, if you don't have enough time to commit to all the hours that they're recommending, it is okay to let them know that you cannot fulfill full hours. So what happens is, and it might depend on the insurance, and it might depend on, where you live, but what typically happens is, if you say, I'm only available for 5 hours a week, or 10 hours a week, 2 hours a day, and your recommendation was 30 hours per week, you go ahead and let the person know, the BCBA know, who did your assessment, and they will kind of let the insurance know, hey, we recommend these 30 hours. However, they're only available for 10 hours. So what that does is, the insurance has to kind of bank those hours. So if there's ever a time where you need to increase, where your availability opens up, those hours are already there, and it's not as hard to request more hours. So again, it really depends on your insurance. But yes, you do not have to, if they say 40 hours, if you try the 40 hours and you feel like this is way too much, it's impeding on other things that I'm trying to get done in my life, let them know. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to provide you services. And if they don't provide you services, I would definitely ask your insurance and talk to your insurance about it, because the recommended hours is just a prescription, right? So, and, it really depends on where you are, but a lot of early intervention, so ages 18 months to 5 years old, they do recommend a lot of hours, but that's because, they're before they're even in school. So before they're in school, they have a little bit more time. And some people are allowed to, drop their kids off at a clinic, or they might have in-home. So it really just depends. We can also, depending on your, providers in your area, they can provide sessions, at the daycare, at schools, if the schools allow them to, and also in the community. So if you need to go to the grocery store and you just need to be able to get groceries, and you can't because, your kids are engaging in specific behaviors, if you're comfortable with it and if your insurance provides it, ask them to see if they can go on a grocery store trip with you and kind of help you, implement strategies and kind of train you on what to do in the situation. So there's a lot that you can do. I know a lot of people going into getting ABA services, they don't really know what questions to ask, and they don't really know what their rights are, or what they can and can't do. So I definitely recommend to ask those questions, and do what you can handle, because if you can't handle, again, that 30-week prescription or recommended hours, and you feel like you can do more and you'll be more likely to, implement those procedures with lesser hours throughout the week, then let them know that. Okay, I hope that answered your question, Veronica. Please add more questions if you have any more. Lorienda, I'm so sorry if I said your name wrong, but you asked, what is the recommended time for ABA sessions? Like, how many hours and days is effective? So this really depends on the need of your kid. So And it also depends on how often or how the availability of the registered behavior technicians and the behavior analysts. So typically, if you have a kid who is in the ages between 18 months and 5 years old, they're more than likely would recommend morning hours, just because, you know, they're not having any, they don't have to go to school, and a lot of their other clients who are older and are in school usually have ABA services after they come home from school. So it really depends. So how many hours and days is effective? And that really depends on your kid too. So I would look at, if your kid is getting the services, say it's a 5 hour, 4 hour session or 3 hour session, and you see your kid start to kind of plateau or not want to, you know, respond to the behavior technician after a certain time, I would look at that as your threshold. So what you do, if you commit to a certain amount of hours per week, so say if you commit to 10 hours per week because that's what your availability is, and you see maybe if you have 2 days per week or 3 days per week, maybe a 3 hour session each. If you see that, you know, your kid is not really responding, not really engaging, you know, not wanting to do anything, you know, their motivation isn't there. So I would talk to your insurance or talk to your ABA provider and let them know, hey, you know, I would like to either change my availability or decrease my hours just a little bit. Maybe you can spread them out throughout the week and have 10 hours across the week, 2 hours per day. So it really just depends. And I would really look at what your kid's threshold is and your threshold. So if you're feeling like I can't go past that 2 hour mark, let them know, and they, you know, they'll kind of work with you. And sometimes they might say things kind of like, well, you know, this is the recommended hours, this is the only time that we have availability, then that will be up to you whether you want to make that change still or not. Okay, so Robert asked, some say ABA like dog trains. I agree. I disagree, because any efforts or exposure to learning anything helps kids. So yeah, like I said, ABA is just a science of behavior. So anything or anyone that engages in behavior, the same principles can be applied. It just looks differently. So yeah, and I do have some fellow BCBAs who actually did their thesis on dog training. And, you know, they go into shelters and they teach dogs who, you know, haven't been adopted yet how to engage in certain behaviors to make them more adoptable. So yeah, people do use ABA to train dogs. People also use ABA for businesses. So to get your employees super motivated to work for your company, a lot of people do use ABA strategies. So there's just, ABA is just super versatile, and there's so many things that you can do. As long as there's behavior, the principles can be applied. Linda asked, how do you know a good company from a bad company? Okay, so this is a pretty good question, and it's harder to tell, but what I would say is kind of look for the providers that hear you. So if you're asking questions and they're there to ask those questions, if you're kind of, if you're, it's such a hard question, because there's so many different companies out there. A lot of companies have different motivations. I would definitely ask questions about, you know, maybe who owns the company and what their background is. So a lot of the times, if companies they'll have companies who are ran by people whose specialty is business, and there are companies who have people who run the business who's also a BCBA. So I would ask those questions and kind of see, and you know, what their goals are long term, and ask, you know, what happens if I want to decrease my hours or change my schedule. And the ones that give you a lot more information and are clear about the information, then I would kind of say go more toward those. Any company that makes you feel uncomfortable or doesn't make you feel heard, then it might not be a good fit for you. I hope that answers your question. Let's see. Okay, Linda also asked, is ABA helpful for social skills? Yes, so ABA is definitely helpful for social skills. It's a harder skill to teach just because the main component that comes with social skills is perspective taking. And even for, neurotypical adults, it's really hard for people to take other people's perspective. So, yeah, I'm currently working with an 18-year-old who's starting to, want to engage more with, adults, a lot more with girls. So we're kind of teaching him how to, have appropriate conversation skills and how knowing when to kind of either give a little bit more detail or not give as much detail. Also kind of coming in and, starting a conversation, exiting a conversation, how to get information, how to, keep a conversation going back and forth. So yeah, definitely ABA is very helpful for social skills. Um, if you have any questions about it, particularly, you guys can feel free to message me and I'd be happy to answer some more specific questions. But yeah, definitely ABA is super helpful for social skills. It's really fun to actually teach as well because you kind of get to see more of like their personalities come out and you get to see more of a lot of the things that we don't really think about that we naturally do. It's like, oh, okay, well, we have to teach these things. But once they get it, and you see that progress, it's just amazing. So yeah, definitely. Good question, Linda. Um, let's see. I see my mom popped on. Hi, Mom. Let's see. Robert made a comment, these kids need so much. Having speech and OT once or twice a week isn't enough. So yeah, I would definitely look at that. So that kind of made me think about, you know, um, looking at your caseload. So there are a lot of different things that, are expected of our kids. Sometimes they have speech, sometimes they have OT, sometimes they have ABA, sometimes they have after school things. So I would really look at it as a whole package. So how much can you handle within that package? So what are your values? Do you value, your kids having more social skills in those after school things? So that's something that, you want to include in, their daily lives. Look at those things and kind of see how you can fit ABA into it. If you value ABA more at a certain point in their lives, then go ahead and look at that. But just kind of look at everything that you're kind of juggling at one time, and not only look at your kids' case, or not your kids' case, just kind of looking at your kids' load per day and your load per day, because you don't want to forget about yourself either, because it's super important. If you're not okay, if you're not able to kind of manage everything, then you won't be any good to anyone. So really take yourself into consideration too and see how much you can handle. Hello, Richard. Victoria asked, do we have to drop our kids off to ABA and leave them? Can we also stay, maybe even behind the scenes? I have to feel very comfortable before I leave my son anywhere. Yes. So I would definitely ask if that is the case. So sometimes ABA companies will kind of put some limits on it depending on what their rules are. You might have to sign some HIPAA papers just in case you see other clients if you drop your kids off. Some providers provide both clinic and in-home. So if you feel more comfortable with just getting started, and doing in-home, you know, that could be an option as well. I actually started a client this week, or not this week, this year in the beginning, and it was their very first time receiving ABA services. And I recommended both, you know, clinic and at home, but I also let them know, you know, I know this is all new for you. If you feel more comfortable starting in home, and then maybe we can have maybe one day at the session once you feel comfortable with, or one day at the clinic once you feel comfortable with what we're doing at home. And then we can do that. And, you know, with the whole COVID-19 thing, we haven't got there yet, but we're just doing in-home, and I'm actually doing telehealth. So I'm doing it virtually, and, you know, our kid is making so much progress, and it's just amazing to see. But yeah, you can definitely ask to see if it's an option to stay there, even if they have parent training hours within your recommendation. I would definitely, or ask them if you can be there during session, during your parent training sessions, and have, you know, so that you can practice with your kid as well. And if you can observe what they're doing with the therapist. So if you do not feel comfortable just dropping them off and leaving them, I would definitely advocate for yourself and let them know that, because it's our job to kind of make you guys feel more comfortable and more at ease. We don't want to make your lives harder, you know, than it is. We want to just kind of bring some value to your life. So if you don't feel comfortable, don't leave them. And it might be a little bit hard because, you know, especially if you're barely getting the diagnosis, or your kiddos are so young, it's going to be a little bit hard to kind of let go. But I think as a parent, you'll know. I mean, I don't have any kids myself, but my mom tells me this all the time. As a parent, you'll know if you feel comfortable, or if it's something that you want to do, if you kind of need a little bit more time. So just go at your own pace. Okay. Do whatever makes you feel comfortable. Okay. So another question asked, Carolyn asked, if I'm not happy with the therapist, could I ask for someone else? That is an amazing question. Also, she is my mom, so I know where she's coming from. Absolutely, absolutely. If you are not happy with your therapist, they are not making any progress, they don't vibe really well with your kid, I would definitely recommend asking for someone else. So basically, and I don't know if ABA companies or providers are letting people know this, but it's kind of like you go to the doctor, you have a doctor, you don't really like your doctor, you want a different doctor, you ask for a new one. So that's the same thing, because we ABA clinics, were either, unless depending on where it is, insurance pays for it. So you have that right to say, you know, I don't think this is a good fit. Can I have someone else? Now the caveat is someone else might not be available. So you might have to wait a little bit, but I would definitely bring that up to your BCBA, your supervisor, and talk to them about that to see if there's anything else that they can do to kind of get that switched. Because you want the therapist that you come either have in your home or you're working with at the clinics. You want your kids, you want to feel comfortable with, you know, who you're leaving your kids with, you know? So yes, definitely. Great question. Yes, Athena, you said, I believe your answer would be to know who is good. You would see changes in your child or whoever needs ABA. Absolutely. Once that will kind of tell you or let you know if you're receiving good services or not. You see the changes, right? So that's very important to look for. If you're not seeing any changes, and a lot of the times, you know, not a lot of the times, we take data on everything. So if you want to ask and request to see the data for certain behaviors, you do that, and they have to show you. They have to let you. They have to let you see exactly everything that they're doing. So if there's a certain behavior, and you're saying, "Hey, I don't think we're seeing any improvements. Can I see the graph?" And then they'll have to show you the graph and kind of let you know if the behavior is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So yeah, definitely. Okay, Carlos asked a question. The question is, does the insurance cover sensory tools that can be used to assist kids? Um, that's a really good question. I think that if it depends on where you are, so the areas that you're in, you want to kind of look to see if they have any resources, because a lot of the times they'll have developmental disability resources in the area that you live in, and they will kind of help you get those sensory things. So sometimes they'll help you get iPads, sometimes they'll help you get respite. So ask your insurance if they know anything about resources in your area, and so that they can kind of, or ask your ABA provider, and ask your insurance. Your insurance also might know as well. So I'm not 100% sure on that question, but I would definitely ask to see, because there's a lot of resources out there that people just don't know about. Okay, so Lydia asked a question that Beth asked. Maybe I missed that one. So Beth asks, my daughter is 16 and diagnosed with high functioning ASD in December of 2019. Is it too late to start ABA? Absolutely not. It is never too late to start ABA. I recently, I took on a case for an 18-year-old, has lots of skills, getting ready to go to college. But we're working on other things to kind of prepare that for, that college kind of life. And yeah, we just started, we've been making a lot of good changes. It's just amazing to see. ABA is for anyone at any age, adults, children, the elderly. It could be anyone. So yeah, absolutely. It's never too late to start. It depends on where you go to kind of to see if that clinic or that ABA provider provides services for adults, but I would look around. And I know with kind of everything that's going on, a lot more people are starting to come out and do more things virtually. So that's definitely something that I'm looking into as well, to kind of, do my own thing and kind of be able to help people all around the world. So I don't have to just be limited to the area that I work in. I can do, online services and help that way. So if you have any questions or anything, you can definitely inbox me, and I'd be happy to kind of navigate those questions there and kind of put you in the right direction if I can. Okay, let me go back to see if I missed anything. I want to make sure that I answer all of your guys' questions, because you guys are asking a lot of really good questions. And just a little tip about insurance, whatever they provide, I would always look more into it, because insurance is probably not going to tell you everything. So I would kind of look a little bit deeper into it. And if you have any questions that you might, if you have anything that you might not know what questions to ask, go ahead and inbox me as well. And I can definitely try to see if I can help as well. Because yeah, there's a lot of rules that aren't, or rules and regulations that aren't really explained or communicated to the parents. So the parents are kind of just like, well, I need ABA. I don't know what else to do. I don't really know what questions to ask. So you kind of just take what they give you, but there's so much more to it than just, you have to have these recommended hours. You have to meet every single hour that they say that you have to meet. It has to be 4 hours at a time. It does not have to be that way, because our goal as BCBAs is to improve the quality of life for anyone that we service. There are also some 35-year-olds that receive services as well. So adults who are older, you know, they might need more functional living skills or living on their own. There's definitely services out there that can provide that as well. Um, Dinah, I hope I said your name right as well. She asked, I'm sorry, maybe this was asked already, but who prescribes ABA for your child? So the person who prescribes ABA is your pediatrician. So you have to get the diagnosis from your doctor, and then whoever, you know, your doctor will kind of recommend either they need ABA services or whatnot. Once they get that diagnosis, that autism diagnosis, then you can go ahead and start, you know, on your search for ABA providers. But ABA is not offered to people who do not have the diagnosis, which in my opinion, I think anyone should, you know, be able to have this type of service because again, ABA is the science of behavior, not just the science of behavior for children with autism. So yeah, it would be a lot easier if, you know, everyone can kind of get the ABA services from their insurance. But yeah, as of right now in our field, we have to get that diagnosis from the pediatrician first, or the doctor, or sometimes I think psychiatrists or psychologists kind of refer them to the doctor to get evaluated for ABA, so, or for autism. So yeah, they have to have the diagnosis. And then I don't know if you were here earlier, but I was just kind of letting everyone know that once you get the recommendation or the referral for ABA services, then the BCBAs, like myself, would do the evaluation and then come up with the recommendation based on the skill level of your kid or yourself if you have autism as well. We get that recommendation based off of the skills, and then we go back to insurance and say, hey, our prescription is this amount of hours of parent training, this amount of hours of supervision, this amount of hours for direct services with the client. Okay, let's see. Here's another question. Does ABA help with self-injury behavior? My son hits and bites himself when he can't talk. What do you suggest to do from at home? Yes, absolutely. ABA services do provide assistance with self-injurious behavior. So what they usually do is we have to, before we implement anything or before we try to make any recommendations for any behavior, you always have to figure out the reason why. So there's 4 reasons why people or things engage in behavior. So one of them could be they want attention. Now, attention is just, it could be social attention. It could just be someone else's interaction. Another thing would be escape or avoidance. They're in a situation they don't want to be in, so they want to escape or leave it, or they kind of anticipate something happening. They know it's going to happen, and then they want to avoid it. They don't want to be there. So that's the second one. Another one would be access to tangible. So that just means access to something that they want, access to things, access to activities, access to things like going outside or playing with the iPad or the TV or favorite candy or favorite show or favorite food. So that would be the third thing. And then the fourth thing would be sensory. So the behavior itself automatically is enjoyable for the person engaging in it. So it really depends. And for self-injurious behavior, since it's such a serious behavior, you know, we really need to make sure that we get that reason why correct, because if we don't get that reason why and we try to intervene on it, then it could make the behavior worse than it is. So it's super important to really kind of understand why that behavior is happening, and then you can. So for example, if you're saying your son hits himself or bites himself when he can't talk, he's trying to communicate what he needs or what he wants. So usually we would give a replacement behavior. So something that they can do instead of that self-injurious behavior. So maybe he needs some type of, some form of communication. So if he does really well with the visuals, maybe there's some pictures he can kind of communicate what he wants or what he needs. Or I don't know how old your son is, but if he can kind of type, that could be something else. Even sign language is another form of communication. So if he cannot communicate, what we would teach is that communication to get what he wants or what he needs so that he doesn't have to engage in that self-injurious behavior. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Tilwaki, I hope I said your name right as well. Please correct me if I don't. You said that I have a 3-year-old on the autism spectrum and I've never heard of a BCBA. Well, I'm a BCBA. BCBA stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. I just call myself Behavior Analyst. But yeah, so we go through the training of ABA. We're kind of the experts in applied behavior analysis. So we're the ones who do the initial assessments and figure out what procedures we need to teach. We figure out the whys of the behavior occurring. We train on the procedures. And then we graph everything. We write the reports to insurance. So we're basically the supervisors of the field. So there's kind of 3 different tiers for people who are certified to provide ABA services by insurance. So some people kind of do it on their own who don't have their BCBA, but they've kind of got the training. It really just depends on what their little niche is. But the first tier is a registered behavior technician. So they get the basic trainings of what ABA is, and they're the ones that work directly with your kid. So after, that kind of section, you don't have to have a bachelor's degree to have your registered behavior technician certification, but you do have to have a high school diploma. Then the next step after that would be a BCBA, which would be myself. So I have to have a bachelor's degree, and then I have to get my master's degree in training in ABA. And then I can kind of supervise those registered behavior technicians and parents. And then the next step up would be a BCBA-D, which just would be a doctorate in ABA. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Let's see. Cynthia asks, my son has shared parenting for his 4-year-old. We took him for diagnosing high functioning diagnosis, and ABA was highly recommended. His mom is in denial and refuses to agree to him receiving ABA. It may come down to me homeschooling him due to her stubbornness. I taught preschool for 14 years, have a degree. Do you feel this would be more beneficial versus school system setting? He gets anxious and at new environment, and I feel he needs one-on-one learning versus being lost in public school. Yeah, so it's this question, there's a lot of components to it, so I'll go ahead and kind of answer each part of it. So the very first part about kind of being in denial, this is a very common thing for parents who just received the diagnosis. It's a hard thing to kind of accept and kind of feel like, well, what do I do next? It's just hard because we don't know what to do, right? So no one really, you go through your parenting classes, no one really teaches you what to do if your child has autism. So it's a very hard thing to accept at first. And then once you kind of get a feel for how things are going and you're kind of in your routine, then that's when that kind of acceptance kind of comes. So it's a process. It's definitely a process. And I don't ever judge parents who are in denial or refuse, receiving ABA. For me, it's just my job to kind of inform them on the resource of ABA. So that's kind of the first part. And then as far as homeschooling and going to school, I would say that, I would do what's best for your kid. So if homeschooling feels best for you, I would recommend you doing what you think is best. But also, if you are going to continue going to school, I would definitely ask what types of services they can do to help. So I know in the area that I live in, they've kind of started this access program, and that kind of helps children who have a lot more skills. They integrate them into a general education classroom, and they do as much as they can to kind of include them in everything else that their peers are doing, but then they also take them out and kind of work on things separately with them in like little small groups and things like that. So I would ask the school what types of resources they have, and if you feel that you still can't get any help, then I would definitely just kind of do what you think is best as far as homeschooling. I know a lot of the public schools don't really let ABA into the schools because they have their own rules. However, I think it would be really beneficial for BCBAs and to kind of help out and train teachers to kind of use the principles to better help the kids. So, and the principles can be used for all of the kids, not just, kids who have an autism diagnosis. Okay. Another question. My son will be 16 in December and receive services from OPWDD. I'm not 100% sure what that acronym is. Should I inquire about ABA with them? Do we have a little bit more information about what OPWDD is? I don't want to answer the question if I don't know exactly what that is. But if you go ahead and add some more information, then maybe I could be some help. Okay. So how do you really tell the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown? That's a really good question. Carly asked this question. So basically, what you look at is the reason why the behavior is happening. So not so much about what the behavior looks like. So we kind of look at what the behavior looks like to find those patterns, right? So that we can kind of tell, okay, every time they're doing this thing, this is happening before and this is happening after. So we can kind of figure out why it's happening. So some people's tantrums look different from a meltdown. Some people have outbursts. Some people get on the ground and, flail their legs and cry and scream. Some people just cry. Some people, throw things in their tantrum. So that how it looks like is not as, I don't want to say it's not as important, but it just looks different from everyone. So you can kind of call it whatever you want. You can call it a tantrum, you can call it a meltdown, but it's just those specific behaviors that kind of happen at that time of the tantrum or the meltdown. But really you just want to look at what's happening before, what's happening after, and you find those patterns and you find those triggers for the things that happen before, and then whatever is happening after is what's kind of keeping that behavior going. So if you change a little bit of what you're doing before and what you're doing after, it might be some help. So I hope that helps. Carolyn asked, you can use your brother if you want. Okay. Another question, what would you say, or would you say ABA can cover a lot of areas? Like if we'd be stopping, would ABA cover that? Or our little one is 2 and still in early intervention and now ABA. I'd rather just do ABA but not miss out on anything if he needs it, such as DI. So I'm not 100% clear on that last part, but ABA is definitely, they kind of look at the person as a whole. So one of the most common deficits in people with autism is communication. Their communication is not as strong enough for other people to kind of understand, where they're coming from or what they need or what they want. So that's kind of the biggest thing that they work on in early intervention, especially if they're so young, they're just starting to develop their language. So it's really, really important to kind of focus on that communication. Another thing that they work on is social skills, and social skills is like a big umbrella of everything. So it can be something as simple as playing next to their peers, playing with their peers, having a conversation back and forth, imitating their peers, because we all know we learn through observing other people and, kind of doing what they're doing. So it can kind of cover that part. Another part that they look at is, behavior excesses. So behaviors that happen too much that you don't want to happen anymore. They look at that. And then also those behavior deficits. So maybe if they're not using the bathroom and the toilet. So we work on toileting as well. There's a lot of different things that ABA can do. So if there's a behavior involved, ABA strategies can be utilized to, problem solve for that particular behavior. One of the things that I've kind of worked on, and I've kind of worked with a range of kids from 18 years old to from 18 months to 18 years old. So there's a lot of different pieces and components at each stage of development. So we look at everything, and we just basically look at how we can improve the quality of life. So whatever is happening in that moment, if something comes up, a behavior comes up, and you let your provider know or your BCBA supervisor know, they can go ahead and help you with that particular thing. So yeah, ABA kind of encompasses everything. I do have some clients who are younger who receive ABA services and who also do the early intervention, especially when they're younger. So I would say it's really up to you, Alyssa. So if you want to do one, do one. If you think you can handle both, handle both. If you want to fade out one and then eventually just stick with that sole one, then you can go ahead and do that as well. Okay, I don't have any more questions popping up. Let's see, I have a little checklist here to make sure I hit every point. But yeah, so I think I have everything on my checklist through. I'm going to give about a couple more minutes for you guys to keep asking more questions if you have any more questions. If you want to revisit, if anyone, wants to get in contact with me, go ahead and inbox me and we can kind of go from there. Okay, well, I don't have anything else popping up. So I just want to say thank you all who participated in this live. This is my first live, so I'm super excited about it. And I'm so happy you guys asked amazing questions. Continue to ask questions. If you feel, something coming up and you're not really knowing what or how to handle it, I would definitely reach out and ask those questions. If you, kind of want to problem solve or ask me any questions to see what questions you can ask to your provider, go ahead and feel free to message me and I'd be happy to help. So thank you, everyone. I will see you sometime in the future, hopefully. Bye.